the meantime, while we solve this technical issue, welcome everybody, and thanks a lot to Brad and Giovanni for accepting to present us the functioning of this new approach to security that was initiated in the city of Milan a few years ago, and now it's hopefully going to be exported in many other countries. So Brad Hathaway, I hope I pronounced it correctly, is the director of pre-sales and product management of KeyCrime company in Milan, and he will tell us about the main insights of this new and the main innovations of this new approach to security. And then we will move to Giovanni's presentation. Giovanni is a professor in economics at the Collegio Carlo Alberto in Turin. And I'm very happy to have both of them here. If you want to find a limitation of this class or several classes in Bocconi or in economics courses in general, well, you can find many limitations, of course, but one limitation for sure is that sometimes it's a bit, far away from reality, right? We've been seeing a lot of academic papers. Some of these are more relevant for actual policy making. Some of them are less so. In this case, we are going to see something that it has really been applied in the city of Milan for about 10 years, and then we are going to see this really state-of-the-art policy evaluation, impact evaluation that has been done by Giovanni and that actually has been published in a top journal in economics. So I think it's a really great mix of relevance for the life of both of us and also scientific accuracy. Okay, so I would leave immediately the floor to Brad. Last thing, as I mentioned in the email I sent to you, I would kindly ask students just for today to postpone the questions to the end of the class, okay? Because some people will be, looking at the presentation in streaming, and so to make their life easier, we're going to devote the last 10-15 minutes of the class to questions, but not before, okay? Thanks a lot, and thanks, Brad, and the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Paolo. I really appreciate it. I'm assuming that as you can probably tell, I'm not actually Italian, even though I've been living in Italy for the last 27 years, since 1993. Wow, so longer than most of your students have been alive. I am currently the director of pre-sales and product management for KeyCrime, which is an innovative startup based in Milan, although I am coming to you from the province of Piacenza, so a little bit far away. Just a couple of words about myself. I've been interested in basically making sense out of data ever since I was very small. And when I say very small, from middle school onward. And this is just another example. And actually, the reason I'm with this company right now, I came to KeyCrime from a large company prior to this, so SAS Institute. I decided to make the jump to KeyCrime because I really wanted to make a difference in people's lives. I wanted to help improve their lives. I see that KeyCrime is basically trying to do that. So let me tell you a little bit about the KeyCrime story. So first, we obviously have to have some legalese. So here we go. Pay attention to this. I'm expecting you to memorize this. There'll be a quiz at the end. I'm just kidding about that, of course. So we're going to go through a little bit of the history of how KeyCrime came to be, first as an application, then as a company. Go through very, very briefly some of the positive results, although Giovanni is going to be doing that in much more depth, so I'll be going through that very, very quickly. I'll tell you a little bit about what the company looks like today. What is it that makes us different? So our unique approach, going through the various steps that we help law enforcement agencies to perform. So we don't actually come in, take over, and we take over and we make law enforcement agencies' lives better, we effectively accompany them in their investigative, in their investigations, by doing as much as possible with analytics on top of the data that they're already collecting. So basically, we go through crime analysis into crime linking, and I'll explain that in more depth in a little bit. From that into prediction. So, what are the next steps that a criminal might take? So basically, where to set up and position to catch the robbers, and then a compare and contrast between the approach that we've been seeing on the market, which has a number of flaws, and Giovanni's going to go into that much more than I will, versus the way that we try to do it, and then what some of the benefits are from the approach that we've adopted at KeyCrime. So a little bit of history. KeyCrime as a software approach. So this is all about computer software, about gathering data and analyzing it. Started up in 2007 with Mario Venturi. He was working at the Questura in Milan. And basically, he said he saw that there was a lot of data that was effectively going to waste. And he reasoned that if he could gather that data in a structured way and use analytics to identify matches between the different events, the different criminal events, that he would be able to then effectively identify where there were multiple crimes being committed by the same individuals or the criminal groups. And well, that's how KeyCrime was born, initially as an application. And it was initially working only on robberies for commercial enterprises in the metropolitan area of Milan. There's actually a nice little video here that if you want to go see, I believe this is Super Quark from a few years back. And there were some positive results pretty quickly. 2008, they started using KeyCrime, the software solution, in earnest, again, for retail robberies. And there was a constant increase in the solved cases. That is to say, when the criminal was actually identified, a name associated to the criminal. And prior to that, up throughout 2007, the estimate is that only 10% of crimes, of retail robbery crimes, were actually solved. And as soon as KeyCrime was put into production and started being used in 2008 in the Questura, they jumped immediately to 47% just 1 year later. And they kept on improving and improving and improving, and over the course of about 10 years or so, that got up to 63%. So that's solved crimes going from 10%, where you've actually identified, ideally captured the criminal, going up to 63% of those crimes over the course of 10 years. But already in the first year, it was already up 37% from 10 to 47. Now, it's important to catch the criminal, of course, but it's also important, and potentially even more important, to reduce crime overall. And well, that is the net effect that the KeyCrime software had. Again, in its first year, it went from the baseline 670-ish crimes a year in retail. It reduced that by 28% already in the first year. So just an organized approach made a big dent. And over time, over 10 years again, that actually had a 58% improvement. But as you can see from the graph, and this is actually real data, as you can see from the graph, it had its ups and downs a little bit, but over time, it had a very, very, very positive effect. Now, KeyCrime today is not just software. KeyCrime is actually the name of the company that we've adopted. It's an innovative startup, which was founded in 2018, with the help of course, Mario, who is our chief executive officer, amministratore delegato. But we brought in, as we established the company, a series of very prominent investors, Oltre Venture, who actually does social impact investing, SDG, which is an international analytics firm, effectively. They build out very large software projects. And Giorgio Gandini, he's a person that's very well known in the venture capital area for private equity in Italy. And these are three big names that gave us really a big push in terms of credibility. And we've gone from building the company, so creating the company in 2018, to building out a team that's effectively able to both support and build out the software, as well as the sales opportunities. So I came on board last year. Stefano Corrado came on board last year, towards the beginning of the year. And we've been able to, in just a year or so, establish some very significant partnerships, IBM worldwide, SDG as a founding investor slash partner. And we've put out and actually installed and been using in the Questura in Milan, the most recent version of the software, which we renamed Delia. And I'll get into a little bit more about that in a moment. Our plan is to go to market worldwide, and actually we're acting on that plan. And basically the sky's the limit. We want to make sure that the positive effect that we've been having in Milan is actually brought to bear outside of Italy as well. So the mission of our company is to empower law enforcement agencies. And when I say empower, I want to underline that it's not about going in and taking over. It's about giving them help, giving them an assist with technology that helps do matching. So basically empower law enforcement agencies with the technology, help them maintain public order, and make things safer in cities across the world. So what is unique about our approach? Well, we start from the position that if you have 50 crimes, they're not going to be committed by 50 different criminals, especially if they're similar crimes. Generally, it's going to be a few criminals committing a good number of crimes. Matter of fact, in the study, I believe that Giovanni is going to talk about later, it was around 18.8, roughly, crimes in a series that criminals were committing, and we've been able to drop that down significantly. Now, we work by helping law enforcement agencies identify crime series. So that's the same criminal or group of criminals that are going out and robbing a pharmacy here, a pharmacy there, a pharmacy over there, and identifying from the descriptions, but also from the characteristics, the modus operandi that they use to identify that those are probably the same criminals. And we do that as automatically as possible using software and comparison. But then we obviously, because the human touch is absolutely necessary, so we basically highlight that these are probably linked crimes, and it's down to the officers using the software in order to actually physically make those links, to say this crime is linked with this crime, that's probably the same person. So identifying the perpetrator's characteristics, so the modus operandi that I mentioned, their physical characteristics like height, weight, this has several positive effects. Well, first off, we're not talking about blind statistics-driven policing. There's a lot of crime over there. Go send some officers to suppress it. In this case, it becomes personal. Basically, it's about the criminal or criminal group and the way they operate. So all of the help that we're giving is targeting an individual or group of individuals rather than just doing hotspot. So getting to know a criminal's habits, their preferred targets, and the areas that they've acted in prior to this, that makes it possible to identify likely subsequent targets. Okay, so if you see that a criminal is sort of moving east to west across the city of Milan, for example, he's likely going to continue in that pattern. Or if he's going ahead and then back and then ahead and then back and then ahead, that's another pattern. We can recognize those patterns, and that's what makes it possible for us to help predict the potential future evolution of a crime series. Because of this, we have found that crime series can be interrupted earlier. So going from, I believe, the numbers that Giovanni is going to talk about shortly, are from like 18.6 to down to around 6 crimes in an individual series, which is significant. The other major benefit is that when prosecutors go to trial with the perpetrator, with the criminal, alleged criminal, they can do it for multiple crimes in the series, which leads to longer sentences when the criminal is convicted. Instead of being caught for just the last crime in a series, they may be caught doing the last crime, but because there's evidence that's been built up over the course of the series, they're actually able to take that and basically get longer sentences, keeping the criminal off the streets for a longer period of time. All of this enables deep crime analysis and, as I said, prediction. Now, about the software. The software is, well, we call it Delia. And this is based on a new paradigm of crime analysis, where the technology helps to make things move faster and to enhance the techniques that are already being used by police officers. So we start with crime analysis. So we start gathering as much data as we possibly can. We actually are able to I think about 1.5 million variable combinations that are used in identifying and sort of, raising the flag about whether a crime is potentially linked to another crime. And that takes into account, obviously, things like date and time and the location, which are very general, basic information, to things that are a lot more advanced and that require guidance, not only for the user, so the police or law enforcement agency user, in gathering the data, making sure that the data that is gathered is actually both accurate, but most often the problem is completeness of the data. We actually have a guided set of questions that allow the officer users of the system to make sure that they are going through this checklist and they gather all of the information that's going to be then able to be used to do the kind of matching that we do. And that gives access to, because we're capturing information about the modus operandi, how the criminal behaved, it gives insight into the mindset of the criminal. And basically, this allows us to identify serial offenders. I mean, and when I say identify here, I want to be clear. We're talking about a virtual identity, right? It's not the name of the person necessarily. It's there's a criminal that's going around robbing banks, and he's about 185 centimeters tall. He's robust, so let's call it around 90 kilos. He's got a mustache. He threatens the tellers with a very specific set of phrases. Also information about how, if he's armed, what he's armed with, the way he uses the weapon in the course of the robbery. And because, robberies are stressful situations or crimes in general are stressful situations for the criminal as well. So they fall into behavioral patterns. They tend to repeat the same kinds of behaviors, the same kinds of phrases in committing their crimes, especially if the crimes are similar in nature, and they usually are. You'll usually find a criminal that has decided that he's very good at robbing supermarkets, so he'll basically continue robbing supermarkets, and that sort of becomes part of the signature of the criminal. And we use that to do crime linking, okay, or at least raise the flag saying this crime and this crime are likely linked with such and such a score. Now, we use spatial, temporal, and behavioral characteristics of those linked events to identify things that characterize not only the individual event and that allow them to be linked, but over the course of the events in the series, these allow us to give sort of a characterization of the series as well. So, for example, the criminal likes to strike on Tuesdays in the afternoon. They've been moving across Milan in this general direction. This allows us to do crime prediction. So based on what they've done in the past, we can then make a reasonable guess, an educated guess about where, when, and how the next crime is going to be committed by an active criminal that has been identified. We've got his criminal signature, so we know what his behavior is like. We know what he looks like. Know his physical characteristics, and we know not only the behavior during the crime, but also the types of activities, the type of commercial activities they likes to strike. So we have an idea of who that criminal is. Not exactly the identity. It's not, not that I'm a criminal, but we don't know that it's Brad Hathaway that's doing these crimes, but we know an awful lot about the person that's doing these crimes. And because we're already tracking them, we can make a reasonable prediction about where they're going to strike, in what general area, and the type of target that they're going to have. And so that's the result of the crime series analysis that we've done up to that point. Now, traditional approaches tend to focus mostly on hotspots. They tend to focus on, where a crime has occurred, the time that the crime occurred, and do effectively statistical analyses on this information in order to say, okay, there's a lot of crime occurring in this area. Let's make sure that that's covered by, more frequently with more police, which then becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm not going to get very deep into that because Giovanni has his own opinions and he's going to give us more information on that shortly. I've got another few slides, Giovanni, so maybe another 4 or 5 minutes, just to give you a heads up. KeyCrime's approach, however, is forward-looking. Okay, it's not only.
Sorry, Brad. Maybe Giovanni wanted to say something. He raised his hand, I saw.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm not
monitoring. I wanted to say that I heard it. So that's fine. I'm ready.
Okay. Okay. Great.
Okay. Thank you. So KeyCrime's approach is forward-looking, right? We include not only space and time factors, looking, towards the future rather than just what happened in the past, but we also take into account what the perpetrator has done in the past in order to predict what they're going to be doing in the future, and maybe even when they're going to be doing it in the future in a forward-looking way. So this is effectively the distinction that we make between our approach and more traditional approaches. Some of the benefits that come from this are a real increase in crime prevention. You can definitely see, because criminals have been put away, they're not going to be out on the streets committing crimes. A real increase in crime repression. So if a criminal actually sees that there are more police in the area that he was likely to strike because of the predictions that we've made, he's likely to not actually, he might show up, but he might immediately turn around and decide to try again another day. There's a real increase in police safety because, well, forewarned is forearmed, as they say. And if you know that you are effectively being positioned in an area because there's a likelihood that a criminal is going to be doing something in that area, and you know that criminal carries a weapon and that it's a knife versus carries a weapon and it's a gun, you've got a lot more information about what kind of danger you're going to be up against. Also, if the criminal has a history of violence, or if he's typically not very violent, that way as a police officer what kind of reasonable force is, well, reasonable force. The public is safer because, well, there are fewer criminals on the streets, and basically there are much fewer crimes with respect to the past. And there's a real decrease in cost for the community. And I'm going to show you a few numbers on the next slide. So we've calculated that we've gone from 18 crimes in a series. So, you know, we're talking about identifying crime series, crimes that are committed by the same group or individual. It used to be that they would commit up to 18 before they were either caught or taken off the streets, or the crime series simply stopped. Now that's down to 6.6. There are 1,000 fewer instances of robberies, of crime in Milan each year, thanks to effectively arrests that have been made with the help of which has had some additional information, some influence by KeyCrime. This saves business just in terms of the amount that has been robbed, that has been stolen, without considering the cost to the community. 2.5 million euro per year, based on real data. And finally, if you take numbers from the US, which talk about the direct and indirect economic impact of each robbery, that's between 20,000 and 40,000 US dollars. So between, I'm going to call it 18,000 and 36,000 euro. If you take that, multiply it by 1,000, well, it's 20 million euro. I'm sorry, 18 million euro versus up to about 36 million euro, just from this one type of crime. So we're working really hard right now on extending KeyCrime's use to the rest of the world, more broadly across Italy. We want to make sure that basically the good that we're doing in Milan has the most impact that it possibly can. Now, just a few conclusions, and then I'll hand over to Giovanni. We are making a difference in Milan, and Giovanni is going to talk about that in terms of it's not just our opinion. There's actually a reasonable amount of data behind this. The benefits that are being realized are significant both for the city and the residents of the city. The solution that we have put on the market, Delia, it's absolutely scalable, multi-language, multi-region. Basically, we were ready to go countrywide. We're working on multi-agency extensions to this. And there are so many things that we have in the works that I would really like to be able to tell you about, but I can't because it's, well, intellectual property. But we are doing an awful lot of work to expand the areas that we're addressing with Delia. And we're working internationally to bring the solution to a broader audience. We are in multiple conversations with potential customers in many different countries on many different continents. So we are looking forward to be able to publicly announce things in, we hope, the very near future. KeyCrime's mission is to help law enforcement agencies worldwide in their fight against crime, because predicting the next move can lead to those law enforcement agencies preventing the crime from occurring. And that's really what our goal is. Thank you very much. I've put some contact information here. Paolo, I will be gladly share this presentation with you later, if you want to spread it out.
Thanks. No, thanks. That would be great. And thanks more in general for the presentation. That was very clear. And so, as I mentioned before, we're going to postpone questions on the presentation, which I'm sure there will be. at the end of also Giovanni's presentation. So I give the floor to Giovanni, that is going to illustrate the results of his work about the impact of this innovation in the fight against crime in the city of Milan. Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Paolo. So, so let me try to share my presentation right now. Basically, the software is saying that it's converting my PDF file, so it should be, hopefully it doesn't last too long. Okay, share now. And then select start to begin. Let's see if you can see.
Yeah, we see that. I
You
see that at least. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Let me, because I don't see it. Okay. Let's see. Oh, but it says that it's loading the file. Okay.
I see the first slide, the title slide.
Okay. Let's see how I do this now. Okay. So I don't see it. Well, it says that it's loading. Maybe it just takes a little bit of time to load on my side.
I don't know if you have a double screen, setting.
Yeah, let me try to open my laptop. Maybe in the meantime, it will load on my iPad as well. Okay, so you see the very first slide.
Yeah, exactly.
So I might need a little bit of guidance, just, okay. Okay, so let me move to the second. Do you now see the second, or?
Yeah, introduction, well, the index.
Okay, yeah, well, this is going to be hard. Let me see, how do I do this? So this is not working particularly good. Select the slide to navigate to. Sorry guys, but I don't see the slides. It's, let's see. Because I tried, Paolo, I tried to log in with my laptop, but didn't manage. Let me try again. Hopefully that works better.
Yeah, so the links are not individual specific. So you should be able to log in with as many devices as you want.
Okay. So then you might have to give me, okay, so this might work better, okay.
Maybe just use a different name when you're prompted to, but I think it doesn't make any difference.
I'm the second Giovanni Mastrobuoni, let's see.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you the moderator role.
Okay.
Just one moment.
Okay, let me turn off the iPad.
Okay, now you are moderator. So you should be able to.
So now, okay, now let me share the screen. Okay, and I share an application, right?
Yes, screen or yes, screen or application.
Okay, perfect. So, do you see it?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, thanks. Okay, let me do this big. Okay, perfect. Okay. Now we are on board. Sorry for this. All right. So, oh, I see. Okay, so let me just simply skip the introduction. I mean, basically, on top of being important for law enforcement, I see KeyCrime as also a way to test whether information technology improves the productivity in the public sector. So you can look at KeyCrime and have a broader perspective, not just the effect on policing, but overall the effect on the productivity inside the public sector. And so this is more like from the research point of view. There are only few papers that manage to use sort of an experiment like the one that I will talk to you about, which has to do with KeyCrime. Let me say one additional thing. I think the other reason why KeyCrime is interesting, it's because this whole sector of trying to predict human behavior is just booming. So again, I see KeyCrime as an example of what is also happening. Think about the internet. Whenever you go on an Amazon page and Amazon already predicts what you might be interested in buying. So they are also using behavioral models based on your past, for example, consumption behavior, or just the behavior of how you went from one Amazon page to the other to sort of predict what you're going to buy. And so, somehow in the same vein, KeyCrime is analyzing the behavior of criminals to predict what they're going to do in the future. The reason why it is difficult to sort of understand whether these IT improvements have an impact on productivity is because typically the data are not available. When they are available, the data are aggregated, and so at most sort of how much on average firms are investing in information technology, computers, softwares, and so on. But these investments, the issue is that they're often intangible. So they are hard to measure. So even if you invest, for example, little in a software, it might have an enormous effect on your productivity. And there is a lot of heterogeneity, clearly. On top of that, and that's the issue also with most sort of predictive policing software, is that these investments typically follow spikes in crime. So when crime is particularly goes up and becomes an issue for the city or the region or the country, that's when typically investments in something new, something that might work, tend to show up. And so clearly this introduces an additional difficulty in understanding whether these investments are successful or not, because you might be investing at times when crime is improving a lot, just because it was particularly high in the past. So what do I do in this study that I'm going to tell you about today? I focus on KeyCrime. So we heard a lot about KeyCrime, so I might skip some of the slides that I have. We already heard what KeyCrime does. It predicts based on past behavior. Now, how do I study KeyCrime? So thanks to Mario and to the police of Milan, I got access to micro-level, if you want, panel data on individual commercial robberies. So a subset of the data, a subset in terms of the number of variables. So I don't have all the variables that KeyCrime collects, but I have all the cases, all the individual robberies that happened in Milan when KeyCrime was introduced, and for the following few years. And so an observation for me is going to be an individual crime, and I call it panel data because thanks to KeyCrime we can link individual robbers over time. And so I use these data in conjunction with a quasi-random variation in the use of KeyCrime, and I'll talk about more about this later, to try to evaluate whether information technology, in general, but of course, I'm going to talk about KeyCrime specifically, helps improving the productivity of policing. And with productivity of policing, what I mean is literally clearing robberies, which typically coincides with making an arrest, at least one arrest after a robbery has taken place. So let me skip. I will briefly say that there is an ongoing IT revolution in policing, and it started many years ago with CompStats, which was a software to sort of gather statistics and improve the accountability of the New York Police Department. If you look at data right now, most police departments use some accountability system. So they gather data, they analyze data, but they typically do this at the aggregate level. Now, the reason they do this is because of what Brett told you about hotspots, which is that if you look at city maps, crimes are typically clustered in space, and more recently there's also so research showing that it also clusters in time. And so the idea is that if you can put police officers in those places, both in space and in time, it might be more likely that you can actually stop these crimes to happen at all, or if they happen, then you might be closer to where the crimes are happening, and you might be more likely to make an arrest. I think before this recent research, including mine, if you were asking researchers whether they think that it works, this focused policing, then criminologists would typically tell you yes, it works, it reduces crime. Economists were more skeptical, and one reason, an important reason, is because the economists think that there would be displacement effects, meaning that if you put more police officers in one place, then criminals might just move somewhere else. Okay, and so overall, if you were able to measure crime all over the place, you wouldn't see a reduction in crime. It's simply that criminals would have moved to a different place, which could literally be also a different city. Now, in my case, so in KeyCrime's case, it's important, Nadia-san, to basically so make sure that things are not driven by spillovers. Okay, so I think this is more or less what I wanted to tell you about sort of previous research. So I told you that that these are the two ingredients: this micro level data and the random quasi-random assignment to the use of KeyCrime that is going to give me identification. With identification, I mean the ability to measure sort of the causal effect of using this software, KeyCrime, and not just the software, but of course also the additional work that the officers that were working inside the KeyCrime staff were putting in trying to predict crimes in order to make additional arrests, improving the clearance rates of the Milan police departments. So, like a preview of the results, when you look at the likelihood of clearing a robbery, it more than doubles when KeyCrime is used. Okay, and there's strong also evidence that this is due to the fact that these crimes are predictable in the sense that I was talking about it. So. We don't know why, but it seems that criminals follow certain strategies. They I guess a little bit like all of us. Some of us are more productive in the morning. Some are more productive in the afternoon. The same seems to be happening with criminals. Some are more active in the morning. Some are more active in the afternoon. And there are additional dimensions that can be predicted. So I will, about KeyCrime, you heard a lot. I will just tell you sort of operationally how, at least initially, KeyCrime was working. So whenever a crime happened, this crime would immediately, this robbery, commercial robbery, would immediately be inserted into KeyCrime's database. And it would cover the entire city. So I will tell you shortly that the city is divided into quadrants. And the Polizia di Stato, so that at that time was using KeyCrime, did not have responsibility over law and order in the entire city, but only in parts of it. But they would still be collecting information about what was happening across the city. And then, once they knew that a crime had happened, what they would do is they would wait until next morning in order to interview the victims and ask a lot of questions about what happened. They would wait in order to reduce the stress that typically victims are subject to. And in their experience, like waiting a little bit would improve the memory of exactly what happened. And then what the algorithm does is it looks for common characteristics, as Brett said, and once it identifies a sequence, so a potential link, it would start generating predictions. And we saw these figures. What you didn't see is, let me see if it becomes bigger. So this is what, by now the screenshots might be different. These were in some sense the old KeyCrime maps. So you can see basically there are two pictures of a criminal, and these are in two different places. But clearly, whenever CCTV cameras are available, it is somehow easier to sort of see that it's actually what appears to be the same guy operating in these two different crimes, and so this would be used to generate a link. Okay, and then police patrols would be given instructions. So this is fairly small. It should be also like bigger. Here, it would give them sort of maps and descriptions of the open sequences. So like they would tell police patrols, be careful in the area that you're planning to patrol. There might be a group of robbers, like on a specific, I don't know, for example, motorcycle, which has these characteristics. The helmets have, also particular characteristics. This is how they typically dress, and they're operating, between the time whatever, like 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. and so on and so forth. So they would give instructions that would help police patrols to be readier in some sense and more alert about the presence of this particular group, and they would also tell them sort of what the potential victims could be and the potential targets, and so that would clearly help officers because they would pay special attention in front of those specific targets. So let me start with giving you some aggregate evidence. So this is the robbery rate in Milan. Like the vertical gray bar is when KeyCrime started being used. It's a little bit wider than just one specific month because KeyCrime was introduced between the end of 2007 and the beginning of 2008. And so what you see is that indeed in Milan robberies were going up, and what you observe is that afterwards robbery were going down, and so you would think, well, I mean, this is already evidence. Of course, this could be happening in other cities as well, the same pattern. And if it was, you couldn't attribute it to KeyCrime, which is why it's important to sort of compare what is happening with what is happening to other cities. You can do that. You can compare the robbery rates, taking simply the difference in the robbery rates between Milan and different cities. When you do that, this pattern is still present. You still see the sort of the increase and then the reduction. Let me just skip. Okay. So basically, so I realized I have an old presentation. Let me just do one thing, 1 second. All right. I'll be okay. No presentation. So let me just close this. Can you see this slide? Okay, let me try to share it again then. Shouldn't take too long. Okay, share application window.
Okay, now I can see.
Okay. Sorry, I opened it up so quickly that it was the old presentation. Okay. So let me start with showing the aggregate evidence. Basically, so as I showed already, Milan shows this increasing and then decreasing trend. So I compare Milan to 13 other donor cities, and then also with the whole province with 24 different donors provinces. So let me show you. Basically, what is the idea here? So I don't know if the students saw the synthetic control approach. Maybe they did, given that Paolo has an important paper on this.
We will see that after Easter. But
okay, sorry. So I
mean, it's a diff in diff, and they've seen a lot of diff in diff, right? So the idea is
okay. So basically, imagine. I mean that what we try. So we see this pattern for Milan. The idea is that we want to see whether the same pattern happens in other city, and we want to produce sort of what this pattern would have looked like in Milan in the absence of KeyCrime. And so the idea is to use sort of the data before sort of the introduction of KeyCrime, that you know so we use those data to construct sort of based on the other cities as like a fictitious city or a synthetic city that is most similar to Milan. So you can imagine, you know, as if, you know, R1 is Milan, and we want to take an average of all the other cities. Each city has an index I that looks as close as possible to Milan before KeyCrime takes place, and then we want to sort of predict what would have happened in Milan in the absence of KeyCrime. So let me just go a little bit quicker, but basically this is the picture that we get. Okay, so this is the difference between Milan and these weighted. So between the robberies in Milan and the robberies in the comparison cities in these synthetic control Milan. Before and after the introduction of KeyCrime. So what does this picture tell us? It tells us that the model does a reasonable job in mimicking Milan up until KeyCrime is introduced, but then it would have predicted again like a zero difference between Milan and this synthetic city of Milan. But in reality, what happened is that we observe a fairly large reduction in the average number of robberies. Okay, so this is basically telling us that that there seems to be, at least at the aggregate level, evidence that crime is going down. Okay, and then, you know, there is also additional there are additional robustness checks. I mean, you can use a larger donor pool, so more cities that sort of can be used to predict what happens in Milan. We can use province level data and so on and so forth. But basically, no matter what you do, is you see this sort of unpredicted drop in the number of robberies. Okay. So these are the summary statistics that of the micro level data that I was given by Milan police and Mario Venturi. So over the period that I have, which is basically 2008 until mid 2011, I have 2,000 observations, 2,000 robberies, and so the first exercise that I do is I try to use the information that I have about these robberies. For example, where they happened, at the time, when they happened, whether sort of the amount stolen and so on and so forth, whether these features are somehow predictable. Especially, I must say, the location, the timing, and the timing are important. The timing in the sense, this a specific moment in time. Okay, and because that's what is needed by the police officers to be sort of at the right place at the right time. The question is, are robberies predictable? And the answer is yes. So criminals tend to target the same type of businesses that are located in the same neighborhoods. They tend to reach these targets using the same mode of transport. This happens typically within a few days from the previous robbery. So they tend to be fairly impatient. So even if so we do observe that if they are particularly successful, meaning that they make a good amount of money in a given robbery, then it takes them a little bit longer to be back. but they are typically back within a few days, and they also are predictable in the sense that they tend to be active around the same time of the day. So let combines all about the predictability. So let the targets. Let's take the targets. We can look at what is the likelihood that one of these targets is victimized without conditioning on anything. So basically, we are looking at what is called the marginal distribution of the target. So that would be the gray bar. Okay. So for example, what this tells us is that banks, like unconditionally, banks have about a 15% likelihood of being robbed in the data. Okay, meaning that 15% of our observations are banks. Many more are pharmacies, so 40% are pharmacies, and so on and so forth. Now, what if I condition the data on what the most common target has been in the past by
Giovanni, I can't hear you. I don't know if it's just me. No, I guess it's not just me.
No, it is not just you.
Yeah, now it's getting back. It's reconnecting.
It is beautiful location communication.
Yeah. Yeah. Giovanni? Giovanni? Hmm. I'm thinking about how I could help, but I don't have any smart idea.
I have a somewhat smart idea. If he continues to have issues, I have his presentation and I could present it to reduce the amount of bandwidth he is using.
Ah, okay. Okay.
I think there is another option, like Blackboard allows you to connect and speak via phone, so you can call a number and just speak to us. There is like the up, like in the up left part, you can see use your phone for audio, so Giovanni can like, kind of call us and continue just speaking to his phone.
Yep.
Okay.
We need communication with Giovanni for that. So let me try writing to Giovanni. Okay, so let me grab his presentation.
I tried to call him.
Yeah, you give him a ring while I'm getting his presentation up. Okay. Class presentation. And let me just share it.
Hmm?
Brad, may I ask a question as long as Giovanni is not with us?
Maybe wait a moment that we have the presentation ready, so I'm gonna call him now.
Yes, please. I'm sorry, we're actually trying to make sure, because we're doing a live broadcast of this on YouTube as well, and there are privacy questions, etc. We're trying to basically not reveal your information outside of the university. So we'll cut off the live feed as soon as we get
Yeah, that was the reason why I asked to postpone questions. By the way, Giovanni hanged off the phone, so I don't know if he's trying to connect again or if the connection is so bad that can't even answer the phone. Hope the first one.
Okay, well, you should be able to see the presentation. I didn't actually have, the exact slide number he was on, though. First on the experiment. We're just about here. So let's see if we can get Giovanni back somehow.
I try to write him.
Me too. So there's nothing quite like dead air. Okay, so let's give us another couple of minutes, I guess, and then if we can't get Giovanni back.
Can you send me the slides in the meantime, Brad?
Yes,
Giovanni's slides, I mean. So I can try to see, because I know a bit his paper.
Okay, sure.
I can try to see in the worst case scenario if I remember a bit.
Enough to.
But, you know, I saw it presented years ago, so I want to make sure I don't say anything wrong.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Just 1 second. Doing that now. Okay, you should have that momentarily.
Hmm?
But he wasn't responding to his phone, yeah?
No.
I'll give it a try. I I have a reasonable idea of what has occurred. He's out in the middle of nowhere. He's used his phone for connectivity, and he received a phone call.
You received a phone call?
I think so. Yeah, it's telling me that the number, not that the number is unreachable, but rather that it is occupied in a phone call. Okay, so I've sent you the PPT. I've actually got it up. You should be able to see the presentation. If you want to just walk through the bits.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Yeah, I'm going through this and try to remember what happened. I mean, what he was doing in the paper, because it's not my paper, so I just want to make sure.
And I'm actually seeing it for the first time. I've read it. Actually, okay, well, it's 16 past the hour. We have 14 minutes left. Paolo, we should decide if we
I'm gonna try that.
Okay. You want to share, or do you want me?
Yeah, I'm gonna share it.
Great.
Don't worry, I can share it.
That's fine. I will stop sharing my desktop then.
Yeah. Okay, I hope you can see that. Yep. So, yeah, so the empirical analysis of the impact, I will skip the details. I mean, for time reason and also for, because I don't know them very well. But yeah, this is the first piece of evidence that Giovanni was showing you. It's basically the comparison of what happened in Milan with what happened in other cities, okay? And in Milan, basically, robberies went down disproportionately compared to other cities. Now, the more micro level that Giovanni started to talk about was within the city of Milan. Basically, you compare the productivity of police and carabinieri, so two different forces, and the idea is that they are really similar. You see from these pictures, the equipment is similar, and even the cars are similar, and the modus operandi is similar, except for the fact that police was actually using KeyCrime, right? So now another crucial point is that basically police and carabinieri, they rotate their activity between the different areas of Milan. Okay, so in some periods the police is covering one area, and in another period the carabinieri is covering the same area. Okay, so the idea is really to compare the probability of clearing robbery when the police is in action, so the police with all this additional information from KeyCrime, and instead the carabinieri are in actions. Okay, and what you see, again, let me skip the details here, is that, so this is a regression of the probability of clearing a robbery. So for the first robbery, you see that actually having the police intervening doesn't have much of an impact, because remember that KeyCrime is doing predictive policing based on past data that you acquire about all these bank robbers in the area of Milan. Okay, and so it's quite expected that the first time that these people commit some crime, basically KeyCrime is kind of, I mean, it's not so relevant, right? But however, already starting from the second robbery that they commit, you find that having KeyCrime in place increases the probability of success of a police intervention. Okay, and so in this last equation, basically what this specification is telling you is that the police, this positive coefficient means that the police is becoming more and more effective. The probability of clearing a robbery is increasing more and more for any subsequent robbery that is committed. Okay, so upon first robbery, you have basically no advantage. Upon second robbery, the police becomes more likely to arrest the criminal. On third robbery, it becomes even more successful, and so on and so forth. Okay, so there's a continuous increase in the probability of success. So here, what Giovanni was doing was to compare the efficiency, the productivity of police and carabinieri, and actually you see, just look at the first 4 regressions, that there's an increase in this productivity is very specific to the police, doesn't occur for the carabinieri, okay? Because the carabinieri, they were not using this.
Okay, I'm back, Paolo. Sorry.
Okay. So, sorry, I was trying to do my best, but I guess it's better if you
could hear you through the phone. I mean, I think you could also continue if you want.
No, it's much better. Okay.
Okay. Share.
You need Paolo.
Much time left. Do you want to tell me which slides you want, and then I scroll them? Because
because I don't have anything to share.
Yeah. So.
Okay. So basically, let me tell you then about this figure. Let's take column 5. So 13% would be the difference in difference, meaning the additional likelihood of solving a case when the police intervenes, and data have been recorded from previous robberies, compared to cases where basically not enough data, so the data were not in yet, and taking into account also the same difference for the carabinieri. So the difference for the carabinieri in the likelihood of solving a case when data have been are potentially available versus they are not available. And can you go to the next slide? Okay. So this is basically this is the other difference that I can use, the other second difference that I can use, the fact that the victims are interviewed the day after, and so you can compare sort of the likelihood that that a robbery is solved if at least a few days happen between when the data when the first robbery happened and when the subsequent robbery happens. Okay, so the idea is, if it's not the same day, if it is a different day, in fact, then you see an improvement in the likelihood of solving a case for the polizia, even if this would be column 1. Well, if you do the same difference for the carabinieri, you don't see much of a difference, and it's like 3 percentage points. So that would be column 5, but it's not significant. So let's go to the next slide. I did a bunch of robustness checks, different functional forms, looking for spillovers. So there was no evidence of like spillovers. The fact that crime goes up in places, for example, where the police are not using KeyCrime. Also, heterogeneity analysis. The results are the same. If you only look at businesses that most likely have CCTV cameras available, and also an important robustness check that tests for selection, because it could be that the smart robbers are the ones that try to be in the areas that are patrolled by the carabinieri, especially if they have been active in the past. But again, there is no evidence of that. Okay, let's move to the next slide. Basically, the conclusions. You can go all the way down. So this is the first quasi-experimental evidence of a causal effect of predictive policing, but I should say of this specific type of predictive policing. I used to call it the micro-level predictive policing because it tries to predict what happens to individual robbers. The mechanism seems to be persistence in criminal strategies, and which happens at the high frequency, meaning that you don't have to wait too long for the next crime to take place. And there is evidence that location, business types, and time matters. The next research question would be, why is it that it matters? Is it learning? Is it rational to simply do this because it minimizes cost for the robbers? Before they learn different areas or working at different hours, instead of sticking to the ones they typically use. Of course, it could also be some biases, like what we would call behavioral biases, some sort of anchoring or some sort of overconfidence. So the idea that if you were successful in the past, maybe you should just redo the same thing over and over because it works, and then of course that makes you more predictable. And finally, let me say something that Brad already mentioned. I do the cost-benefit analysis. If you look at the numbers, it seems to be an amazing investment in the sense that the cost is fairly small. Of course, the cost might be larger now because the investments are more important in the software. But the benefits, as already Brad said, are quite important. And let me not go into this, but the idea about the benefits is to sort of figure out how many crimes there would have been in the absence of KeyCrime. And since KeyCrime data allows us to look at what is the likelihood that you recommit a crime, we can actually build a life table of these criminals. And therefore, we know what the likelihood is that you are back in business if I don't catch you, and so basically, at the end of the day, it turns out that the increased likelihood of solving a case reduces also the average number of robberies these criminals sort of commit before being arrested, and so. That basically produces that 2.5 million euro sort of benefit in reduced direct costs from these robberies that already Brett talked about. Okay, this is it.
Okay, thanks a lot to both of you. I think it was very interesting. So if Brad, I don't know if you want to add something to conclude before we maybe get some questions, or
No. I just have to apologize to Giovanni for stealing some more of his numbers than I thought I did. I'd like to ask Vincenzo, who is listening on the phone, to stop the live stream on YouTube, and then we can open up the floor for questions from my point of view. I don't know, Giovanni, is that okay for you?
Yeah, sure.